Hello, this is Zach from W Freelancing. Today I'm going to walk you through a process you can use to get service offering ideas that clients are already paying for. So if you've ever struggled with thinking of a niche or finding problems to solve with my skills, today's process will hopefully be really helpful. We're going to be basically generating these kinds of ideas through actual data and actual case studies of clients who've hired other agencies with your skills. So hopefully get you a little bit unstuck there. Let's dive on in. Alrighty, so hopefully my Notion notes aren't distracting for you, but it'll help us all see what we're talking about. So first up, what we're going to do today to surface this data, there's a popular agency directory called clutch.co. And this will be really useful for us because there's a straight up testimonial goldmine available to us on Clutch. So here's an example of one that we'll be looking at together, which is just for some development agency that I found on here. But importantly, Clutch has these really nifty fields available for clients when clients leave a review of agencies where they can say what the challenge was that kicked off the project. And this is if you've ever tried to find valuable service offering ideas, this is the biggest gem that I've ever seen this week. Because ultimately, to do marketing well, we need to know the problem that our clients have, and we need to know who those clients generally are, aka a niche. Sorry from the microphone bump. And we need to know the solution they want. So niche, problem, solution. These are three big elements that are always on my mind. And for certain people within my course, like backend developers as a really good example, it can be hard to find a good niche and problem, especially if they come from a background where they've been a contract developer for one big ass company for a very long time, because they're just one cog in a broader machine. And they're the problem is they need backend work done, but it's hard to build campaigns around. And a lot of the time, if they go do their marketing campaigns, they have to kind of guess about what a company might want, what the company's problems might be. So I've been trying to find different solutions where we don't have to guess so much. We can just find actual examples. But where this gets hard is that there's this concept of basically, hold on. Had to think of the concept. So demand capture and demand generation. So demand capture is something where it's the client already knows they need a developer, and you say, hello, I'm a developer, hire me. And then demand generation, the client doesn't necessarily know they need a developer yet. They only know they have this problem that hurts. And demand capture is nice because the sales pipeline is simpler. They say, I want a developer. You say, hi, I'm a developer, and they hire you. Demand capture is a little bit harder demand generation is harder because you have to say, hey, you're having this pain. It's solved by this thing. I can solve this thing. So you have to do these two leaps. But the issue with demand capture is that that's where commoditized pricing comes into play. Upwork is a demand capture platform. And as every freelancer knows, the downsides of these demand capture platforms is that your rates just kind of sink to the bottom of whatever the pool of offered rates are. And this is getting accelerated by AI. So what we need, the solution we need, is we need a data-driven way to observe people's problems. But this is really hard. In general, it's hard to find these things. This is something I've been wanting to find a framework for a while. So I'm exploring different opportunities and ways to do this. And what we're doing today is one such way. Because when a client leaves a review and they say why they hired an agency, and they give a good reason, not just because we wanted our app built, but it's because our website crashed every 5 days. That starts to give us little clues that at least one person in this one niche has this one problem. And if we can find trends, suddenly we have a really compelling case for outreach campaigns or ads or whatever you're using as your marketing strategy. So that said, today's process is for you if you are skilled at doing some kind of craft, but you don't necessarily have experience with a niche or a problem or an ICP. And ICP means ideal client profile, just a more specific niche. So basically just anyone who's I'm a good developer or a good designer or good whatever, but I don't really know what problems I'm solving and who to do it for. I have some cluttered notes here of the various things that we'll want to look for. I'm not going to read them all off because I think it'll be pretty implicit as we go. But as I mentioned, we care the most about niche, pain, solution, problem/pain, same thing. One thing I wanted to note, if you are somebody like a developer, there's one other element for you. I think it's less relevant for designers, but I think designers and copywriters have a different version. So for developers, often you are competing against in-house resources. And at this point, for designers and copywriters, often you're competing against DIY with AI. So for developer, you are competing against, we've already got a dev team, they can just do this. If you're if you're a designer or copywriter, you might compete with, why should I have you do this when I could just talk to Fable and Fable will do it? So in these cases, I think it's good to be thinking about another layer beyond just that pain that we'll be looking for. And we want to look for something, if it's relevant for you, that flags why they sought out an external hire. So this is going to be most relevant if it's like, imagine you're a developer wanting to work with SaaS companies as your niche. SaaS companies are by their very definition capable of producing code. So if you are a developer producing code and they are SaaS producing code, why should they have you do it versus someone internal? And you want to keep an eye out for that. And then in the case of copywriters and designers and things like that, we would want to see if we see any signals of like, we were producing this in-house with AI and it sucked or whatever as the context. So the end result we're going to look for with this mining process, and really any mining process, we want to find ideally 3 identifiable businesses who look similar to each other and who had kind of similar looking project scopes for similar reasons. So in other words, 3 instances of a niche plus solution plus problem. Because the reason is the problem, the project scope is the solution, and similar to each other businesses is the niche. I think you could probably, like, if you've struggled with this for a while and you already know how to like run cold outreach experiments and stuff, if you're really struggling and you find one you're fired up about and you think it stands to reason more people like this one person would have the issue, you can totally run a campaign even if you just find one. But just be aware that if you say that a sample size of 1 equals something that applies to a lot of people, you could be wrong. And so if you want to minimize your chances of burning a campaign on something that people don't really care about, try to find more than 1 example. That's my opinion. And I think 3 is a pretty good rule of thumb here. Because as you'll learn in a minute, it's not like there's a huge amount of data, because most reviews that get left for agencies don't give us what we need. Most don't contain really good pain and solution and goal kind of information. So the high-level process we're going to pull up, which I'll walk you through a real example for, is this. So we're going to pull up Clutch, which is that agency directory, and we're going to browse to whatever category in there lists agencies who do similar scope work as you. We are going to then look at reviews of these agencies, and we're going to look for reviews that specifically have little signals of like pains and goals. That's what we really, really, really want to know. We don't care really about the project scope. We care about why they sought out that project. And then we're going to look for trends and develop a strategy. And so as you're browsing, it's not just pains and goals that matter. It needs to be pains and goals that you can solve first and foremost. I would hope that goes without saying, but in case it doesn't, it's just been said. But then the other layer here is that you can credibly solve. So imagine you spoke to this person who left the review for this agency on Clutch, and you were right there at project proposal time competing with this other agency. And the client asked you, why should I hire you versus this agency on Clutch? Would you have a compelling answer? And of course, sometimes the answer, like you're not going to be better than this agency I pulled up on Clutch that has this big team and they've been doing it for a million years. You don't have to be better than the agency. All I'm getting at is probably, let me think of a better way to say it. So let's say we remove comparison from the picture, because I would find comparison triggering. Let's say they just said, Zach, why should I hire you? Why should I trust you to be able to solve this problem for me? The best way for you to answer that is to point to things you've done that are similar. So I solved this similar problem for this similar looking client. That's compelling. I solved this similar looking problem for 12 similar looking clients. More compelling. And then less compelling, but still compelling, I solved a similar looking problem for a client who looks totally different. or I have solved, this is the least compelling but still minimum viable. I have solved categorically similar problems for categorically similar kinds of project scopes. And that's what the example we'll look at today will be. So that'll be more clear in a moment. And then the final step of the mining process kind of goes beyond mining, which is that you start validating it with campaigns. So I personally like what I call value forward cold outreach for validating ideas, because we can basically get right in front of our targeted leads and find out if they actually care about this problem and the solution, which is really, really nifty. So let's dive in to an example of that mining process. So when I was playing with this, was looking at this agency called Simform. I think I found them, I just went, yeah, it's just software developers on clutch.co. And these guys are like a sponsored listing near the top. They had a bunch of reviews, so I figured we'd find some good ones. And I was just basically combing through them. And as you can see in my Notion notes, there were quite a few that I kind of ignored. So in this case, they said, we want the refactoring of this thing. We want to redesign it. Like, these things aren't really that helpful. Although this one I actually did end up using based on what was further down. So let me just scroll from the top and show you some. So in this case, we have this medical device company. They said, we are performing extensive research and development in addition to making new products. Okay, well, that's not really that helpful. This does, again, we're looking for pains and goals. Like, that's kind of the thing, and pain especially. Why did you choose them? Because they seemed good and they were cheap, not useful. Doesn't say pains and goals. So that's basically the work right now, is you just scroll through all of these, and you can rope in AI and code to do this at scale. But I think your first three, it is really useful to do it manually and start to build this pattern recognition of pains and goals. So let me show you the first one I found that was actually really good. And it might have been the only one, at least on the first page here for these Simform guys, that was really useful. So it's this one, customer software development for an education company. At first, it doesn't look very good. So refactor, registration platform, redesign or rebuild, like, that's not helpful. It doesn't really tell us, it tells us goals like zoomed in goal, they wanted to rebuild their registration platform. But when I say goals, I should have made this more clear for you earlier. What I mean is if you go to dyf.link/thermometer, what I'm referring to are goals that align to things on this like service offering value thermometer I created. So leads to sales, traffic generation, traffic to leads, repeat sales, expense reduction, insurance, audience nurturing, authority building, and product development. These are like the buckets that I have conceptualized of all the things a client ever cares about. Like, every service you could ever do for any client, this mental model posits could fit into one, or most likely a lot, of these buckets. So in this case, what we learn a little bit further down is these guys wanted to improve their online registration and sign up platform. So if we just look at this one part, we can already guess at some of the buckets, right? Like, if these guys do education and they need people to sign up for it, what bucket of goal does that fall into? In this case, it might be traffic to leads, or it might be leads to sales, depending on if signing up means enrolling for a paid course or like signing up for some free thing. But in any case, we now have a little bit of an idea of what their bucket of goals are. And if you can find something in this green category, it tends to be easier to sell than something in this yellow category. So again, if you want to reference this, it's dyf.link/thermometer. But back to the process. So looking for pains and goals. And from that perspective, none of this was useful. We don't get to see any thermometer goals here. Registration platform is kind of vague. It only became specific down here. But once we got down here, it got pretty dang exciting. So I pulled it into Notion and I did some little highlights of me kind of excerpting things to make it easier to scroll through. I had AI try to like extract this from JSON, and it changed the wording a little. So if you're going to play with scraping these and having AI weigh in, don't do what I did, because in this case, the AI transformed the data in a bad way. Wherever possible, when you're doing this kind of work, it's best to be referencing literal first person, like I language, that the reviewer literally said. Because the more you can kind of immerse yourself in the language of the actual audience, the easier it's going to be to write any kind of marketing copy, like cold email copy, ads, whatever. And you'll see in a minute when we write the campaign that we can just like kind of parrot their own words back at them, which is pretty exciting. In any case, pretend ChatGPT did not rework the writing. Like it just changed it a little bit, and I started to notice it down here. It was like, I don't know, it doesn't matter. They just said the word they instead of I at some point. And I was like, chap, did you fuck this up? Yeah, I learned he did. In any case, the reviewer, we see that their position is Director of Education and Enrichment. That's useful data for knowing about a job title. Who cares about solving this problem? We see the size of the company, so that gives us a little bit of an idea of what kind of company is having this problem. This here is great information about the niche, so non-classroom based charter schools. And we could broaden this presumably to a lot of other things like private schools in general, but basically non-platform based schools. And I don't really know what a charter school is, but I think it's like a private school where you pay for it directly. This is an assumption. I would need to do research if I were targeting it for realsies. And then flex-based learning environments. So we're starting to get context of who this is from. And I would only spend the time caring about this context if I saw the pains and goals markers, which I did. So we scrolled up and spent a little more time. So in this case, the pains and goals here were kind of interesting. You can see I've called out a couple of pains here. So improve reliability is stated as if it's a goal, but someone only cares about improving reliability if their current thing isn't reliable. Same deal with maintainability. Like you're not thinking about maintainability until you have something that's not maintainable. And then long-term scalability, I would categorize as a goal because I think people do in general want that. Another nice little clue here, you can see I pulled this one into a lot of clues. So originally we have a client context clue. So they say the existing system had grown over time. And this is important because what it shows is that these guys hired this agency not for a greenfield project where they're like, hey, we're a traditional school and we're building our first online education thing. Instead, it's like we had our first online education thing. It was unreliable, unmaintainable, and a bottleneck that was preventing us from scaling. Those three things they said right there. And so now we needed to make it less shitty. And so we can extrapolate a lot here. So that's the first thing is we extrapolate. We don't even extrapolate. We just see it's a rebuild. So it's not greenfield. And what's kind of cool about that is that means this was a client with like a pre-existing online registration platform that has probably been around for many years. And what that means is that probably the company has done a good amount of marketing and released like blog posts and PR and stuff like that that point to the fact that they do this. And this is useful for me as the person generating some leads because basically this is going to be a long video if I talk about it, so I'm not going to, but there are a bunch of different like outreach list building strategy categories that I like kind of fit every kind of list building strategy into. And one of them is what I call semantic search. And this is finding leads based on how they describe themselves on their own homepage. And so the reason I spelled all this out for you is that fast forward to a few minutes from now on the lead side, and I was able to use this tool called Disco-like that I really like from a semantic search standpoint to find a bunch of other schools that are matching what, at a glance anyway, appear to be the same, oh, not this one, the same general ICP of the people who hired this agency, which is to say like schools that do online teaching. And this Disco-like search was only matching based on building an ICP profile from what we described looking at this lead. So it's quite complex, but the kind of distillation of this little side quest that I've been on is whenever we're looking at this identifying info about a client, we want to be thinking, like I said, who are they? What are their pains? What are their goals? But who are they as a fundamental concept isn't on its own so useful. We need who are they from the standpoint of me being able to find them. Because if you can say, they are the director of this kind of company and they want to do this, and the primary thing that identifies them is the fact that they want to do this, there's no publicly viewable way to know what somebody wants to do. We can only know what somebody is doing or does say or does look like. And so whenever we are thinking about like potentially choosing a niche for running campaigns to, we always have to be thinking about targeting. So with outbound, that means building a leads list. And with ad platforms, it means using whatever targeting the ad platform supports to show your ads just to this person and not to a million other people. And so for outbound, I'm always thinking, how do I pull a list of these leads? What does this kind of company look like? How do I know if somebody is a good fit or a bad fit? That kind of thing. So let's keep going because I think this video is already like 20 minutes long. I highlighted these sections, or maybe this whole section, just to kind of call out, actually no, this whole section, to call out that this all sticks out to me as just vague, generic, and useless. So when you're looking at these, like, you really want to be cherry picking specific pains and goals, not general. Like, all of this is just basically saying we wanted someone who did a good job for cheap. That's like what all this says. And that's what everybody wants. So it's not really that useful. What we want to know is like, what caused them to even solve the problem? What was like, they got poked and they're like, ouch, I don't like this. Because once you can find that, it gives you a basis to send your cold emails talking about that. You poke that ouch for them. And if you send this to 1,000 leads and this is not just something specific to this one person, and assuming you nail your copy mechanics and your deliverability and the million other things you have to do to have your outreach actually get replies, if you strip all that stuff away, if you have a good problem and a good solution that is indeed something people relate to, you should get some replies. And that's all we're trying to do, is just find something that people fundamentally relate to, fundamentally see as a problem they want to solve, and see if they reply. And that gives us a little bit of early validation that this is an idea that might have some legs and be worth pursuing. So the final things I called out as useful, required a little bit of extrapolation, but not a lot, is again, this concept of wanting to improve system stability. That's, again, to me, a lot of this is an opinion and an extrapolation that I'm making, and I could very well be wrong, and that's why we want more signals from more people. But if someone wants a more stable system, to me, it's a sign that their current system is not that stable. Because again, this is the kind of thing you don't really want until you have the opposite of it. And then supporting future growth. The implication is that they don't feel like their current thing does support growth. And so when I think about the context of a user registration system, like, what does that look like? What kind of user registration system to me would feel like it was hampering my growth? And probably that's something where maybe the user experience is bad, maybe it's slow to load, maybe it crashes, maybe there's an outage whenever they get a lot of traffic, that kind of thing. And this idea of visibility into infrastructure and monitoring, people don't give a fuck about monitoring their infrastructure until their site crashes because of resource overutilization. At least in my opinion. These are all opinions and guesses. And the reason we're doing this exercise based on real from the horse's mouth testimonial data is that we're always guessing when we send marketing campaigns. The more we can get data like this, we like shrink our guess's like wrongness surface area. That's all we're ever trying to do. So it's still always a guess. Like in the process of analyzing this, I've thrown like 10 guesses at you. But the more data we get, the more people we see saying similar things, the more our guess risk shrinks. And then the thing that shrinks it the most is you just send your damn campaign. If you send a campaign around your shrunken guess, which sounds kind of gross, but your shrunken guess, and you get good replies, then that's awesome. You're off to the races. So from there, to just kind of rewind a little bit, at this point, we're done with step one. You'll want to just do what we just did for a bunch of agencies and a bunch of reviews within them. And it might probably take you a couple hours minimum. Like this is a big process. And if you want to speed it up once you're starting to get a rhythm for the mechanics, you can use Apify actors, which are just these scrapers. I used this one. It's kind of expensive for what it is. We could probably find a cheaper one. But basically you can plop in, or if you use Claude Code or Codex or Cursor, whatever, you can do it with an MCP from within there. You plop in a URL of the clutch profile. You can scrape the results down to JSON. Let me find one. Here you go. So you can bring the results of all the reviews from the page into JSON. You can also do it as like an Excel file. And then you could orchestrate AI where every single review, you can send it off to an AI whose prompt is basically saying, hey, does this have tangible pains and stuff? You can download the transcript for this video, use that as the training data for the thing to create your prompt to analyze each one. But that's fancy. You don't have to be fancy. You can just do it by hand. It doesn't really matter. And as I said, even if you are a dev and you get excited at the idea of automating with AI, do it by hand. Do it a lot by hand. And if you are going to use AI, what I would recommend is that you see AI's role in this process as like filtering out the chaff and surfacing ones for you that are worth manual review, but you still manual review yourself. And maybe down the line, once you've found a lot of good looking ones, maybe you can throw all the good looking ones that you manually reviewed into AI to help spot trends for you of like unifying principles that apply to multiple. I think those are both good, but use your brain for the kind of judgment and stuff. So once you've done that, where we are left is with this ClientForge stack, as I call it, part of my course framework, SaaS built, that kind of thing. We have the niche, we have the problem hypotheses, which I'll talk about more in a moment. We have quite a lot of problem hypotheses. And we have, where the heck am I? We have mappings to the service offering thermometer that we looked at earlier. From there, when I was playing with leads, I basically took the scrape of that review and my journal template of assessing this thing, put it into ChatGPT to have it help me develop like an ICP prompt for Disco-like, which is in the list building category, so I'm not going to get into that here. But basically had it develop for me this ICP prompt, which Disco-like can parse into lookalike text, homepage text, etc., to generate leads for. Generated a few leads, and from there we would want to click into them that make sure they look like what we expect, start to get some awareness of what the niche looks like, what's good, what's bad, refine our list building query, that kind of thing. But then from there we can plan our campaign's copy around this. And this is the part that is relevant for this video, and then we'll go. So at this point, like if we were to take everything from this one review, or in your case, hopefully like 3 reviews that all had trends, and we kind of collect the pains. What I like to do is paste the first person thing they said and then do sub bullets for like what they're saying within that. So in this case, this line from the review, like they're saying these things. They're saying signing up is not reliable. App isn't maintainable, doesn't feel scalable, feels like a duct tapey, unwieldy system, that kind of thing. For anything where I'm kind of guessing a little bit more, I would want to flag it as such. So like here I made inferred : like this is what I'm inferring from it. Whatever system makes sense for you, but you'll want to flag for yourself what you're guessing about versus what was literally said, because if it was literally said, it's trustworthy. If you're guessing, it's a guess. And where it gets exciting is you can build your copy just kind of from stuff they said. So this email here would not convert as well as a like lead magnet email, as I'd call it. So this email I crafted is an example of one that's not really crafted to get the best possible positive reply rates. It's more crafted as a simple, low effort way for me to send an outreach and see if I get replies. So from an email kind of along these lines, somebody in my course has a campaign that's booking like 8 clients a month now from a 0.3% positive reply rate, which isn't very high, compared to something I would typically target more like 2%. But the cool thing about these emails is that even with something low like 0.3%, because you're not doing a lead magnet funnel and you're just going straight to call, those calls are going to close higher. So he's seeing like 0.3%, but then most of that 0.3% is booking a call, and about 50% of people who show up to the calls close. So there's some pretty cool mechanics a little bit further down the funnel here. And yeah, if you just look at this copy, like I'm not going to read it off, but basically what we're doing here is we're just kind of taking whatever we think is most likely to resonate in terms of the pains and building our hypothesis around this. So in this case, as I think about the service offering thermometer, the thing that presumably schools will care about the most is like getting students in the door, because that translates to money. If you can find something that translates to money, people will care more about it than something that doesn't if you are a service provider. So in this case, we're essentially just encapsulating those pains that we saw here, tying them to the idea of like customers signing up. Try to keep the email short. This one's a bit long for a cold email. We want to usually keep it like 3 short sentences. And in this case, and that's not counting the like sign off stuff. In this case, it's 4 sentences, one of which is quite long. So if I were sending this for realsies, I'd want to tighten it. But nonetheless, I think this would be a nice V1. Send that to 1,000 leads, do all the good deliverability stuff that if you're in the course, you already know, the 200KF course. Otherwise, that's well beyond the scope of this video. FYI, for everyone watching, this is going in both the course and YouTube. So if you don't know all the deliverability things, this last part would be quite advanced. But if you do, then you just do it as normal. And we want to aim for that 0.3 to 0.5% positive reply rate. So in other words, 1,000 leads contacted, translated to at least 3 positive replies, is a nice early signal that this is worth pursuing further and sending some iterations for. If you don't hit that, but you get something, like you at least get 1 positive reply from 1,000 leads, or maybe you even get 0, it could still be worth an iteration. Like if you had some other pain ideas that you didn't act on, you could totally iterate in that space. But yeah, I don't know what I would do in that situation. Let me think. It's hard to give you a rule of thumb. I would say play it by ear. If you think it's worth another campaign iteration, like you had something really compelling that you collected here, but you didn't speak to it, could be worth an A/B test. Otherwise, back to the mining process, find something else. And that's what's kind of exciting about this, is that when you're scraping niches and problems from your offers, there are millions of possibilities that exist. So there's no real reason to get locked into this one specific niche, unless you like have some affinity for them or something. But if it's just a niche and problem that got surfaced, you can have a campaign going out to them while you are reviewing new clutch listings for new ideas to be prepping your next campaign in case this one doesn't work out. And that's the really cool thing about this process. So play with this. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it gets you a little bit unstuck if you've struggled with this. And something else I want to play with, but I haven't yet, is the first party data deep research driven version of this. Instead of scraping from Clutch, we could like find agencies who've put case study posts on their own sites. So I'll probably play with that at some point in the future, but if you play with that and have results, let me know. So from here, if you want to operationalize this in your business, I would recommend you go to dyf.link/scale, which will hook you up with my Build the Business, Not the Job course that I made. It's essentially a free little master class. It's about an hour where I extracted everything I know about client acquisition, outreach, lead gen, scaling, and getting off the fulfillment hamster wheel. It's just like everything I know about how to grow a solid service business, whether you're a freelancer or an agency. And it'll go a bit further than what we did today, because today we zoomed in on one specific part of the process, which I would call part of the productizable wedge process. But seeing how it connects with the whole framework, really, really useful so that you can kind of steer your business ship towards where you want to go as you move forward in time and scale. Because if you just set out to like get more clients, you'll often struggle to actually achieve that goal due to some of these other issues that happen in this order taker trap that I talk about in this free training, which is that you essentially might be able to go generate some clients, but then if every project is bespoke and all over the place, you get maxed out on fulfillment, so you stop generating new clients, and that's where this feast or famine roller coaster comes into play that pretty much all of us can relate to as a freelancer or agency owner. So yeah, check it out. Very useful. dyf.link/scale. And see you in the next one. Bye.